The Lightning are in the Final Four again. The Avs are staying alive, and the Canucks are down to their last life. It's Tuesday, and this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast, powered by SportsBettingDime.com. Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Hockey Debates podcast, powered by SportsBettingDime.com. And as always, the Hockey Debates podcast is brought to you by SportsBettingDime.com, your leading source for odds, sports news, and game predictions. If you're looking to see who's the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, the Hart Trophy, or who's going to win a specific series, check out all the info at SportsBettingDime.com. We'll be talking about some of their Stanley Cup odds today, and we'll also leave you a link in the description of this episode for you to check them out for yourselves. And with that, Kevin, why don't you introduce today's guest?
I will, Bob. Our special guest is Erik Erlandsson, who is the writer and guru of HockeyInsider.com. That's a website and a podcast, and you can check him out there for all the information about the Lightning. And that's why we want to have him on, because the Lightning are safely moved on to the next round, and yet there's still plenty of questions. We don't know what's going on with Kucherov. We still don't know what's going on with Steven Stamkos. So much to ask. Let's just start there. I'm sure John Cooper gave you all the information about those two players.
Very forthcoming.
Yeah,
no, not so much. I mean, look, it's as I've been trying to tell people, the information vault has been locked. It's what happens when you have this situation where everybody's in a bubble and there's no independent media to kind of watch practices or see anything. That's usually where we get all our information, right? So we don't have access to that. So all we can do is ask the coach. And, John Cooper shut it down about a week and a half into the bubble regarding Steven Stamkos, saying when there's an update, I'll give you one. He was asked about Stamkos again before the start of the series against the Bruins. Same message. And when there's an update, I'll provide one. And then we saw Nikita Kucherov leave in the second period of the game, game 5 against Boston last night. And we were told we get an update today. Surprisingly, we did not. We got the old, I haven't talked to anybody yet today, even though it was a late afternoon press conference. So nothing new. I don't think anything is going to be long-term with Kucherov, just based on sort of the information that we do have and kind of judging the fact that he got hit. It was a high stick, and then he came back, and then he left. I don't think that's going to be anything long-term, but that's just kind of an educated guess, sort of reading tea leaves a little bit.
Do we have any idea what's going on with Stamkos? And any whatsoever, or any speculation?
The only thing that we can go on is the one time he has talked since the league came back with that first training camp date back on July 13th. He spoke the day after the team got to the bubble. So that was July 27th. He was just sort of starting to get the practice with the team. And, he had mentioned that what he's dealing with is related to the surgery. It's not from the surgery, but it's related to the surgery and the recovery process. And even John Cooper's referenced that a couple of times. So it's not necessarily a new injury. He did have the surgery back in March. And, my one source basically said there was a wall hit, and he just hasn't been able to push through it. So, but again, you can't see anything. You don't know anything. You just kind of try and find information wherever you can get it. But that's the best we have on Stamkos' situation.
Erik, does it speak well, though, to the Lightning's chances that, they are missing two key pieces now, with Ryan McDonough also out for most of the series against the Bruins, and yet they just keep rolling along, where you look at a team like Colorado, who were one of the favorites certainly in the West, and they lose Philip Grubauer, and then they lose Erik Johnson, and they lose Nikita Zadorov, and it seems like since then they've lost their way, but yet Tampa Bay just keeps rolling. Does that speak to their experience, because they've been through this journey a few times?
Well, experience and depth. Their core has been together for 5-6 years now, for the most part. Even McDonough now has been here for 3 years, so they've had a lot of playoff success, even though they've never won the Stanley Cup during this little window. 4 Eastern Conference Finals in the span of 6 years. That's some pretty good playoff success without actually having sipped from the cup in this situation. So they've been there and they've done that, and I love this quote that Julien Brisebois gave back right before training camp opened up. He said, "Embrace the suck and dance in the rain," which basically just means control what you can control. If things don't go your way, just keep playing, right? And the game against the Bruins in game 2, they had a goal overturned. They had a goal that was scored on them that you could argue should have been blown dead because Vasilevsky had it covered up. And they said their quick piece about it, and they went out and played, and they ended up winning the game in overtime. So that's kind of where their mentality is, and it's a little bit of a different mentality certainly than, you go back to losing game 6 and 7 against Washington in 2018, and then what happened last year against Columbus. So they just have a different mindset this year, and I think you lose a McDonough for 3 games. Okay, fine. Luke Shen and Braden Coburn come in, play some of those minutes, and they did a very good job of doing that. Nikita Kucherov goes down, fine. We're going to win this game in overtime. They're just kind of a narrow focus, if you will.
Yeah, Eric, what you're describing there is kind of what we call, mental toughness. Basically it feels like on the ice they've added some spit to go with their polish. But that doesn't explain why they suddenly seem, as you said, more mentally tough in terms of their ability to handle, this adversity, because it snowballed on them last season, I thought, against Columbus. Like all of a sudden they lost one and they went, uh-oh, and then they lost 2 and suddenly they just kind of fell apart. This team doesn't feel like would do that, and they have overcome. How do you explain that aspect of it? Like, I think the additions of like Patrick Maroon, he didn't help them during the regular season, but he's a contributor in the playoffs when it gets a little tougher and that sort of thing. But how do you explain just that they now seem to be able to handle that? Was it just sitting around and discussing what had happened to them and realizing that, they can survive those kinds of things?
Well, there's a couple. I think bringing in a guy like Maroon, bringing in a Kevin Shattenkirk like they did too. I mean, Maroon he's coming off the cup win last year for St. Louis, so he has that fresh experience. Shattenkirk's a veteran. He's kind of have a chip on his shoulder a little bit because of the way he left New York after last year. The Lightning certainly have a chip on their shoulder. I know John Cooper has mentioned that it's a perfect chip on your shoulder sort of matchup between those two players. And then I really think what they went through in the early stages of this year, based on the way last year ended. I mean, they were a 500 team right up until Christmas, and you were wondering, okay, what's going on with this team? They can't seem to find their way. There's no consistency. Sometimes you need that, because last year everything went so easy, right? Like you win 62 games and you think that everything is just going to work your way because you're just that good. And then this year they have to do the opposite. They have to really fight for who they are and forge their identity. They had that trip to Sweden back in November that kind of brought everybody together. And, so it wasn't until after Christmas they went on a 24-game stretch where they won 21 games. And that kind of really brought everything in. So I think that's just where the mentality comes. So they went through early season issues and adversity to sort of forge their new identity for this year.
It does. I've said this before. It kind of reminds me of what happened with the Red Wings in 1997 when they finally got over the hump and won the cup. They had that year too really didn't look like a great team for much of the year. And I remember at the All-Star break, and I've brought this up before, I mentioned it to Steve Yzerman, and he said, I have more confidence in this team's chances to win the cup than any team I've ever been on with the Red Wings. I thought that was kind of surprising to hear at the time, and I remember when they did get there against the Flyers, I asked him if he remembered that, and he said it was just because of the makeup of the team had changed. Kind of like what the Lightning have done when you add in Goodrow, you add in Coleman, you add in Maroon. There's a lot more sandpaper in those bottom 6, a lot more guys that are tougher to play against. And that's kind of what the Red Wings did, adding guys like Shanahan and McCarty and Thomas Sandstrom. And it just seems like, you need a lot of different elements to win the cup, and it seems like Tampa Bay now has those different elements.
Yeah, and that's a good comparison. And even going back to 2018 when, Steve Yzerman was still the general manager, and then last year when he was still a part of the front office before he left to Detroit, there was just realize how hard it is to win the cup. You can be a talented team, but you have to have things go your way, and you have to force your own luck sometimes. But the additions that they've made, and I think you said the right phrase there, Bob, is hard to play against. Everybody talks about toughness and physicality, and that's great. But if you're a hard team to play against, I think that's a different factor. And, when you bring in a Coleman and a Goodrow, they're not big guys by any means. I mean, Blake Coleman's about 5'11". I think Goodrow's about 6'1", 210. So they're not like imposing physical figures. But boy, do they play the game hard. They are in hard on the forecheck. They are annoying to play against. And that sort of changed the personality of this team a little bit, known as a speed and skill team. Well, now they've added this sandpaper factor, and it's changed what they can do, what kind of makeup they can throw at other teams on the ice. And if you look at the success the Gord line has had with Goodrow and Coleman on it, it's just given them a different look and a different feel beyond the Points and the Kucherovs and the Johnsons and the Plots in that group.
You brought up Shattenkirk before, and I think of him and Bogosian. Like, we often don't talk about players' talents, but we don't talk about whether or not they're a good fit with the team they're with. Like when Shattenkirk went with the Rangers, they needed him to be like an all-around defenseman, the guy that could take care of business at both ends, and that really isn't him. But Tampa doesn't need him to do that. They need him to sort of play the way Shattenkirk plays. And the same thing with Bogosian. Like, he looked done in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And then he comes to Tampa, and you can almost envision the conversation with Cooper saying, you just be Bogosian and just don't get in the way of the way we do things, and we'll be fine because we need a Bogosian, the way you play. And, you look at that, and he looks like a nice fit because he's not trying to do too much, just trying to do it. And all of those elements, like, I think it's all part of this, why this team looks so much better is they got a lot of guys playing in roles where they're really comfortable in playing them. And then they have a lot of stars that can kind of take care of business.
You need some star power, and even though you're missing Stamkos, I mean, Braden Point has just been phenomenal in this playoffs. I mean, you can tell he's healthy, just the moves he can make and how he can generate speed and, the quick little darts that he can make in and out. It's just fantastic to watch him in the series. Kucherov has been really good as well. Maybe his numbers don't jump out at you that we're used to, but he's been really good in this postseason. But a guy like Bogosian, he's motivated, right? He had a terrible time in Buffalo, the way it ended. He couldn't even get on the ice. He comes here and he's told, okay, look, you come in, you might get a chance to play your Victor Hedman. Be who you are. Don't step outside yourself. Don't think you have to be a certain way. Just play who Zach Bogosian is, and you can have a chance to play with Victor Hedman. And they've been a pretty good pairing when they've had 6 defensemen in there. So he's brought a motivated situation. A guy had never played in a playoff game before. And then you look at a play that he made to set up Blake Coleman's goal in Game 2, where he splits a couple of D and he throws a puck over to Coleman as he's falling to the ice, and Coleman does the Superman to try and poke the puck in the ice. Those kind of plays are there within him. Even a guy like Ryan McDonough, who in New York was everything, right? Like, he was power play, penalty kill, top line, everything. Here he's asked to take a step back from the power play, be a penalty kill guy, be the top pairing guy against the other team's top line. So everybody, you need this in a successful team. You need everybody to understand what role they're being asked to perform and go out and perform it.
It kind of reminds you of when the Wings, again, those 97 Wings brought in Larry Murphy from Toronto, and hockey people kind of scoffed, and he ended up putting him, Scotty Bowman put him with Nick Lidstrom, and they were the best defensive pair in the playoffs. So you just never know. Guys fit in the roles, and certainly if you get the right fit, you can go all the way. Now, naturally, coaches and players will tell you they're taking it one day at a time. We don't have to do that here. We can look ahead, and we don't know who Tampa Bay is going to play yet. It looks like it's going to be the Islanders, but it was interesting from the betting standpoint going into the Eastern semifinals. Tampa Bay and Boston were 1-2 favorites to win the East. So basically the bookies were saying whoever wins this series is going to the Stanley Cup final. Right? What do you see the challenges for the Lightning against each of those teams?
Well, if it is the Islanders, they are a frustrating team to play because, I look at them, they're almost like Columbus with skill, because Columbus didn't have a lot of skill, but they really packed it in defensively in their own end. They really protect the middle areas of the ice. They make it so hard to get in there, but they can counter. Beauvillier and Barzell and those guys, they can really get up the ice if you make a mistake against them, and that's what they wait for. And that's an MO of this Lightning team that used to be there. They would be impatient. They would make a mistake, and it would end up costing them. That's different this year. All you got to do is look at that 5 overtime game against Columbus, to where they didn't force it. They waited for situations to happen. They did not want to beat themselves. And the Islanders are a team, they're going to wait for you to beat yourself. It'll be a test of will for this Lightning team if they're going to do it. And that's a new mentality. And I look at the Flyers somewhat similar. Like if the Flyers get a lead, I mean, it's Alain Vigneault hockey, right? Again, protect the middle areas of the ice and don't let anything in. So whoever they're going to face in this next round is going to be a test of patience. But that's where the Lightning's depth comes into play. They're so deep that they don't have to rely on one line to score. They can have a Gord line go out and make a difference. And Anthony Cirelli has a couple of goals now, as he gets the matchup situations, but he can score. So whichever team they face, though, it's going to be a difficult task, because both those teams will be patient and wait for you to make mistakes. And this will be a test for Tampa, because they're not traditionally a team that is patient.
Well, Erik, we've run out of time. We appreciate having you on, but I have a funny feeling we're going to be talking to you before the Stanley Cup final.
Hey, I would appreciate it. Anytime you want to have me back on.
Appreciate it, Erik. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay.
Thanks,
That was Erik Erlandsson, who is the lightninginsider.com. Does a great job of covering the Lightning, really wired into what's happening with the team, and has a does good analysis on what makes them tick. And I agree with what he had to say about if they have to play the Islanders. I think I like what he said, that they're kind of Columbus with a little more skill. Columbus didn't have a Brock Nelson or a Barzal. They had Dubois, who was coming of age, but they didn't have as many weapons as the Islanders have. So it will be interesting, because they're every bit as good defensively as the Blue Jackets are. So it'll be interesting. And I'm not discounting the possibility that the Flyers could rise up as well. That's still a good team, obviously.
You kind of wondered, did Philly shoot their best shot in the last game? I mean, they had 39 shots, 35 scoring chances, 13 high danger chances, and still couldn't solve the Islanders. Is that, when Erik talks about frustrating, that's got to leave the Flyers just absolutely flummoxed that they could come with an effort like that and not get rewarded.
Yeah, and they lost me a little bit in the decision not to play Carter Hart in that game. And I get that it was back-to-back, but, he's 21 years old. I'm reasonably confident that he's not overtaxed. That, I'm sure the argument would be that mentally, he's a young man and still has to work his way through it. But, he is a critical part of why the Flyers are who they are and why they got this far when no one was really expecting that. And I thought it was disruptive. And that's not to say, the goaltending cost them, that game. But it didn't. But one of those great lies in hockey, the players say, well, it doesn't matter who's in net, we play the same. Well, that isn't really what happens. You adjust your game based on that, and your confidence level is lowered or raised depending on who's in net. And I think the Flyers are just so confident with their young star back there. And, they all know that he's been compared to Carey Price, and they've seen it. And they've seen what he can do. So I would have just saddled up that horse and rode it out, and not to put so much stock in the statistics about how goalies do when they have to play back-to-back.
Well, if you check the odds on tonight's game at bettingdime.com, you'll see it's a dead even call. Both the Flyers and Islanders are getting minus 108 odds to win that game. So the odds makers are still seeing that series as a toss-up. At least certainly they're seeing Game 5. Now, you mentioned goalie switches, and the one that utterly baffled me, why would Rick Bowness go to Ben Bishop when he's got a chance to close out the Avalanche, a team is dangerous? You don't want to give him a second life. You go to – I know he's your number one goalie, but he's going to be rusty. Hudobin had played great through the series. It's been a real crazy series with lots of goals. I just thought that was a baffling, utterly – and possibly it could come back to haunt them, because now you've breathed life back into the Avalanche.
Yeah, I mean, that one's on him. You almost wonder whether he said that to his players. But, I mean, you couldn't, because, then you've admitted that you're Ben, it would have been too hard on Ben Bishop. But, that was a inexplicable decision, and it's time honored to ride the hot goalie, and I think Bishop certainly would understand. Like, it was one thing if you're starting the series over and you went to Khudobin and you said, okay, obviously Ben Bishop's our guy. He had a great run, but we're going to try to start from the beginning of this now with this series with Ben back, because that's he's our number one. And but in this series when he's played so well, I mean, it's almost like you've damaged both goalies now, because Bishop, his confidence can't be all that high based on his performance level, and now you've told Khudobin, even when you're playing well, we still don't have enough trust in you to continue away. So I agree with you, Bob. I didn't like the decision, and and up until that point, I said that Bonus is probably doing as good a job as any coach in the playoffs. Like, he has just pulled all the right levers and done an effective job, and he has this team playing. They struggled so mightily to get a goal in the regular season, and now they're scoring goals. Well, I suppose we have to give Rick Bowness some credit for that. He's found a way, obviously, to breathe some life into their offense. So, and have they awakened the sleeping giant there? I'd be where I wouldn't be comfortable with my lead if I was Colorado. I'd say, boy, let's get out and get our foot on the throttle and get back at this, and try to put some pressure on that defense that's battered up. And they got their third goalie in there now, and you got to put up a better performance than they did last game.
And the bookies seem to be leaning that way too. If you check the odds at SBD.com, you'll see that the Avs are heavy -124 favorites to win Game 6. So there's a lot of odds out there that we're going to see 7 games in that series. And you look at these 5 games, and I think the best bet in sports right now is to play the over on the total in a Stars Avalanche game. It's only at 6 for Game 6, which is astonishing because they're averaging 8.6 goals per game in that series. They've scored 43 goals between them through 5 games. It's like 80s night every night when they take the ice.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's not that we don't expect Colorado to give up some scoring chances, considering their number one goalie is out and Erik Johnson is out. But we don't expect Dallas to score like this, like that. And there's so many explanations for this. I mean, obviously, Jamie Benn has raised his level. He's a better player than he was during the regular season. But, Joe Pavelski has been a much better player. He's Joe Pavelski again. He's playoff Joe. They've really looked different. And, I think this has given Boston fans yet another opportunity to watch the playoffs now that their team is out and wonder what the heck they were thinking a few years back when they got rid of Tyler Seguin. He is a terrific player, and we notice him more when there's a playoff spotlight.
Well, we mentioned a lot about goaltending. It's always a hot topic in the playoffs, and as Vancouver gets ready to try to stay alive against Vegas, there's rumblings that they're thinking of going to Thatcher Demko instead of Markstrom, and they're thinking maybe Markstrom's a little worn down. He's faced more shots than any goalie in the playoffs, but is this kind of just a Hail Mary to kind of throw something different at Vegas? Because it just seems like, as much as we admire Vancouver and you can see they're a team on the rise, they might have bit off more than they can chew here with the Golden Knights.
Yeah, I don't like that. If that's what they're going to do, I don't like it. I think Markstrom, he does look fatigued, and it's pretty clear Vancouver is overmatched in this series. And, they're a team that I think we're going to be talking about for the next several years. But it really hasn't been Markstrom's fault. And, you're trying to re-sign him. I just don't like that move. I'd say I'd bring him in. I'd pump him up and say, you're our guy. We want you to be our guy. Go out there and give it all you got. And let's, try to win a game instead of, trying to call him in and saying, we just think you look a little tired. Like, what message is that to send to a guy that's so important to your deal? So I don't think that's the right decision, and we'll see what they do. I mean, it's one thing to hear rumors, but let's see who's in the net when they play.
Well, I mean, there's heavy odds on Vegas in this one, minus 235 to close out the Canucks in Game 5. And Vegas remains in the, if you check the sportsbettingdime.com Stanley Cup tracker, Vegas is the plus 300 chalk to still win the Cup. Tampa Bay's closed a little tighter, though. They're at plus 330, so their Lightning are starting to get some action. And then it really flies off the analysts. Like, people already decided this is going to be the Stanley Cup final, because you go to Dallas is at plus 600, then you got the Islanders at plus 850, and Colorado's climbed all the way up to plus 1,600. So there's not a lot of people with faith in the Avs anymore. So are we? You think we're already looking at a Vegas Tampa?
Well, it feels that way to me. But if I had a few shilling to risk, I might take a flyer, no pun intended, on the Islanders. That's an interesting team. Like, if you start to describe the way we used to think you needed to play to win a Stanley Cup, you're talking about Barry Trotz's team. You're talking about a team that's hard to play against, doesn't give up a lot of shots, getting consistent goaltending, have it kind of all going, and yet have just enough stars that, they can make a brilliant play if they need it. Like, they don't have the firepower of a Tampa. But they got Barzal, they got Anders Lee, who has scored been a 30-goal scorer. Brock Nelson, can get a big goal now and then. There's enough there. So, and I like their odds. So if I was looking for sort of a value bet, and just as a dark horse that, you just think, a chance to maybe make a little more money, that they might be a team. Like, would you be absolutely stunned if they won this series and then beat the Tampa Bay Lightning? I can't say. I mean, I expect Tampa to beat them if that's the way we end up in a conference final, but I can't say I'd be stunned if the Islanders were able to knock off the Tampa Bay Lightning.
And they're the one team that has a coach who's won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
with that team, but he did win. He's won the Cup, and it's really a bizarre playoff, as some of the teams you're used to seeing in the hunt, like Pittsburgh and Washington and Boston, getting bumped aside. We're poised to have a team win the Cup this year that hasn't won the Cup in a lot of years. And even Tampa Bay, it's been 16 years now since they won. Dallas won in '99, Philly 75, Islanders 1980. Vegas has never won it. And you start looking around, and whoever wins, it's going to be a big story, because they haven't done it either ever or in a very, very long time.
Did you hear yourself, Bob? You said Vegas has never won it. Like, they got to the final in their first, season, and now we're talking about they're going to get back to the final again. So they just started and they get to the final 2 out of the first 3 seasons. It looks like. Holy cow! That's pretty darn impressive for the Vegas Golden Knights. We've talked about this before. I like that Vegas team. There's so much going for it. I like that Shea Theodore has taken his game to another level. They got 2 goalies that are capable of winning the Cup, in my opinion. Lennon's playing well enough to win it, and Fleury has won it, and he's got a big game. They got a lot of scoring up front. They can get scoring from all 4 lines. There's just so much going on this Vegas team, so I like it a lot. But let's just look ahead and have some fun and say, okay, it's Vegas versus Tampa. That would be a great series. A lot of star power, a lot of skill. Like Tampa, we don't give their defense any credit, but now they've overhauled it. There's some guys that can keep the puck, away from the net. Bogosian can certainly, do that. And Ryan McDonough, it can play a shutdown role as well. So they can play a pretty strong defense, and they aren't just all offense in Tampa. And likewise, I thought the addition of Martinez for the Vegas Golden Knights, I thought it really rounded out that defense. This is a guy that obviously has played in a lot of big games. Is a guy that is a two-way guy. He can make that good first pass, but he's pretty much known for a guy that can play against the top players in the league.
And Vegas has got to be a team that everybody embraces, because they've got that kind of old school style where they're they roll four lines. They say, you've said before, they don't really have a superstar. They don't really have a premier line like, say, Boston does, but yet all four lines seem to be dangerous. All their defense from top to bottom. Again, there's no Norris contender there, but they're solid. And analytically, they're right now in the playoffs. They're first in Corsi, first in Fenwick, and first in high danger chances. So they're answering all the bells for no matter what school of hockey you follow.
Yeah, old school, new school. They're the team to beat. Yeah. I mean, if I'm Tampa though, and I've just heard what you said, I'm a little bit offended just because, Tampa, even though they don't have the statistics, they're every bit as dangerous, and they look the part as well. That's why I'm saying it could be, a great final. But anyway, I mean, we're going to have to sort of play it out and see what happens.
All right. Well, we've played out all our time for today, and we thank you for joining us. I'm Bob Duff. He's Kevin Allen. We're the HockeyDebates.com podcast, and we'll be back with you on Thursday afternoon. Everybody, have yourself a great day.